In this week's video, I'd really like to inspire maybe just a couple of people to try out 3D graphics, because we've all seen plenty of movies which have those big CGI shots, but I think for a small-time filmmaker there's actually a lot of use for just having a little bit of knowledge about how 3D graphics work. So that's what this week's video is going to be about. Hello, my name is Cade, and this is DSLRguide. So the first misconception that people have about 3D graphics is that firstly it's really expensive, and secondly it's really difficult. So both of those things I think are not really true, because firstly you can get Blender, which is a very powerful 3D graphics program, and that is totally free and open source, and it's always being updated. It gets better and better every few months. And then the next thing is that people think it's really difficult. Now I do agree that the interface of programs like Blender can be a little bit daunting. When I first started out, I tried it, I followed a tutorial, and then I gave up because it is a bit of a steep learning curve to get started. But I'd like to really encourage you to stick with it, because it really does get a lot easier. Once you come back to it a couple of times, you'll find that everything's a lot more natural and you start to understand the way things work in general. So one of the main things I use 3D graphics for is when I'm trying to explain an idea to someone. So drawing a picture is usually better than just writing something down, but if I can make a 3D model of, say, a rig that I'm trying to build, or of a shot that I'm trying to work out how everything's going to work, of where everything is placed, if you can just make a very basic, simple model, and you can even dial in the measurements for everything, you can find yourself with a very accurate diagram, which makes it a lot easier to communicate about pretty much anything. But naturally, 3D graphics can also be used in your films as well. So one of the main things that I use Blender for is to make intros or title screens. So for every short film that you make, or every YouTube channel that you have, or even every promotional video, it's good to have an intro or a title. And using a program like Blender is a really great way to up your game and have even more creativity when you're making a title or an intro. So even an inexperienced 3D artist can make a pretty nice intro, and this saves you a lot of money rather than trying to hire someone, and it usually looks better than if you just did it on 2D in After Effects or something like that. And the other thing is, once you get more confident with modeling and textures, you can actually basically create anything to put into any scene. So motion tracking is getting pretty good these days, to the point where as long as you shoot right, you can actually add a dinosaur into your film, or you can add an explosion, or just anything you can think of. And having CGI really does open up doors in terms of the stories you can tell and the ideas that you can say yes to, because anything you can think of you can potentially make. And I would say that even if you don't have a burning desire to become a 3D artist, I still think you should give it a go, because if you're in a few years' time, or maybe even next week, working as a director or someone who's in charge of a 3D artist, maybe you're hiring a 3D artist for your own project, it would be really useful if you had just a little idea of some of the vocabulary and some of the core ideas of how it works, because that's going to make your job a lot easier when you're trying to communicate with a 3D artist. And they will always appreciate if you have just a little bit of knowledge about what they're trying to do, because you know the limitations, you know what's going to be a little bit more difficult, and you just have a general idea, which makes it way easier to communicate. And as a director, communication is one of the main things that you're doing. And the last reason to try 3D graphics is because you might find that after trying it, you actually really enjoy it, and you decide that this wants to be your main career path. So if you haven't tried it, then you can't really say that you're not into it. So I think you should just give it a chance to just learn a little bit, because then that opens a lot of doors for you. So if you are interested in doing 3D, I have a few bits of advice for just getting started. So the first thing is, obviously there are lots of tutorials out there on YouTube. My favourite tutorials come from Andrew Price on YouTube. His tutorials are very well rehearsed, and they have really useful information, and the end product is always really good. So check out Andrew Price. But also I'd just say, when you're watching tutorials, try to avoid just totally copying them, or maybe copying them first, but then use those same techniques to try something else, because if you can apply those techniques to other things, then you'll be learning a lot more than if you just blindly follow that one tutorial for how to do that one thing. And finally, I'd just say that if you are working with real footage, combining it with 3D elements, I'd just say make sure that you shoot smart when you're on set, because just spending extra 10 minutes making sure you've got good tracking points, noting down your camera settings and your lighting setup, that can save you so much time when you then bring it into your software, because although these 3D software is really powerful, you can save yourself so much time by just making sure that you sort out those problems earlier on, because really you can't fix everything in post. So that's it for this week. I think I'm going to do some more of these why filmmakers should learn web design, why filmmakers should learn music, all sorts of different elements of the whole filmmaking process which a lot of people seem to miss out. So if you're interested in those videos, again, make sure you let me know in the comments, or just let me know what you think of this video in general. And yeah, that's it for this week. I'd also just like to remind you that I'm starting a thing on Twitter. I've been doing it for a few weeks now, where I use the hashtag DGCheckThis, as in DSLRguide, check this out. And this is essentially a collection of old videos which I watched, and they have helped me tons to teach me everything that I know about filmmaking. So I thought I'd just share these with some of you guys, because there's some really inspiring stuff behind the scenes of movies, great tutorials from all sorts of people all over YouTube. So I really recommend that you check out my Twitter so that you can find those links to those great videos. And yeah, that's it for this week, and I'll see you next time.